All right, so we're going to watch a video by a gentleman named Abraham Piper. If you're familiar with that last name, you've probably heard of his father, John Piper. Unfortunately, his son, Abraham, left the faith quite a ways back, and he's been more aggressively making videos online attacking the Christian worldview. And so we're going to watch one of his videos and respond to it.
Some Christians just love God. Their religion is a kind of celebration, a fandom. Church for them is like getting to go to ChristCon every week. And I respect that. But then there are the Christians who argue all the people who have a million reasons why you should believe that their God is ultimate and absolute. We don't need to disrespect these folks, but we can fully ignore them for a very simple reason. And it's not because they're wrong. It's because you can't argue that something's absolute. Offering evidence that God is absolute means you believe there's truth more fundamental than God that should lead to belief. So is God absolute or not? The Christian God is supposedly the foundation of reality, the source of all truth. And that's fine to believe, but if you argue it, if you defend it, you're disproving yourself. If God had premises that led to belief, God would be a conclusion, not a source. Relative to the premises, not absolute. If absolute truth had a basis, it wouldn't be absolute. The basis would be absolute reality, whether or not it's anthropomorphized as the Christian God. Whatever it is at the bottom of it all has to just be. It's axiomatic, indefensible. What Christian zealots don't seem to realize is that their careful, clever debate tactics just show their lack of faith. Defending God reveals unbelief in God's ultimacy. The only conceivable, absolutely true religion would be one whose only defense is a shrug. And if you find one of those, you simply live it and laugh merrily at the idea of having to explain it. How silly. Debate it? No. Anyway, thanks for watching this not grammar video. Come along if you feel like it.
So first off, my first response to that is ha 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 ha.
You're gonna shrug.
I don't feel, and I think you'd agree that in some sense we don't need to defend the Christian God because as far as it's concerned, I think it's apparent. Does that mean
right? And apologetics isn't necessarily about defending God.
Mm-hmm.
It's about giving testimony of God's work in our own lives. So if someone gives Paul that used as the words used in the New Testament, we forget the exact Greek term, Paul, that's literally like we pronounce it in English.
Apologia.
Yeah, not my.
The only Greek thing that I know.
Hopefully, I can pull it up, but that's aside from the point. The point is that as it's used, it's not like God is not plain and clear in everything in every part of life. That's not the Christian position. We're not trying to say... now, classical apologists might fall into that trap, where they're actually trying to prove the existence of God, while at the same time saying God doesn't need to be proved.
Right.
Because, that makes sense. But I think going back to your point, getting at the heart of the video, number one, he says there's no way to know things absolutely, but yet or even to be a zealot and push their view on them. Well, in the very video, he's arguing for absolute truth. Mm-hmm. He's pushing his view on everybody else, and he's basically telling the true believer, the one who's actually sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with people, to stop doing that and become like him and buy into his worldview, where you can just laugh at everything and shrug. What does he say? Like shrug?
Yeah, shrug and laugh.
Yeah. So basically, in that video, if Piper pays attention to what he's arguing, he's doing the very thing that he's saying not to do. He's trying to get his own disciples, get them to follow him. So this goes back to our point earlier about the knowledge of God. You're never working from a non-critical standpoint as a human being. We always have a basis of our faith. And that's another distinction he seems to forget, is that faith is not something that's... Christians have faith, Islam has faith, this person has faith, but me as a neutral, agnostic, make fun of religion type, I don't have faith. No, that is a faith. Mm-hmm. We always have a starting point of basis, our epistemic point of view is our faith or our trust grounded in what's real.
Yeah, he's trying to he used the word axiomatic, which is basically is a word you can use when you're saying I have a starting point philosophically that is unjustified. He's acting as though he doesn't have one, though. He's acting as though he can critically understand the things around him without using axioms.
Right, which goes to his point why he started trying to say, I think, and if we stopped it a bit earlier, I really wanted to pin it down, but I'm certain any of our viewers can go back and listen to the very beginning there, but that I think what he was saying was that he doesn't believe there is absolute truth, that you can know everything for sure. But that is a positive assertion that he knows for sure. Mm-hmm. Which begs the question, how does he know that for sure? And he'd have to keep saying, I don't. And by doing that, the very words of his mouth are saying that he's literally standing on agnosticism as his truth. So anytime you start any equation with agnosticism, what will you get at the end? Agnosticism. Yep. So that's the problem with classical apologetics in my mind. There's good in classical apologetics, but one of the problems is that if you start with trying to prove the existence of God, even though you know God has plainly revealed himself in all of creation, like the psalmist says, but if you just set that aside and go on to the agnostic starting point and say, let's just presume that God needs evidence, and you start to prove God, you can prove him to such and I think this led me as an early Christian to want to strengthening my faith as an early Christian, young Christian, is that as you observe the reality, you do observe all the probabilistic knowledge points back to a creator. However, all at the end of the day you can say on that empirical reasoning is God probably exists, which goes and serves to his point. We don't know. However, that's not a Christian position to begin with, right? The Christian position was always, from creation onward, forward, God exclaims himself in all of his handiwork. It's handiwork. We don't look, when you look at Jake and I sitting here, you're not looking at, maybe that's God's handiwork.
Right.
No, we're all creatures. So do we start off by saying, well, it's phenomena. Well, what's phenomena? You already bought into agnostic starting point by calling physical stuff phenomena. We should always start with creature, creation.
Right.
Right? I don't know. Give some more. I don't.
Yeah, that's it. I thought that he gave a very interesting. Well, I hope we got a recording of that.
Yeah, there's a recording of that. Move back here.
There we go.
That's a cool stool, though.
The guy who fell asleep in the
Oh yeah,
fell out of the window during Paul's sermon.
Backseat Baptist.
Ethan's like, I've heard this spiel from these guys 50 times.
Yeah.
In fact, 49 of them, I was sitting there with them.
Take 2,500. No.
So yeah, as far as Piper goes, I think that he gave some interesting points that I would use if I was not quite in the same manner. But if I was arguing for what's called presuppositional apologetics, like you were mentioning, classical apologetics has this tendency to work from an autonomous starting point, trying to prove the Christian God to somebody else who wants to be autonomous in their thinking. So that our position, though, would be that since God is the ultimate definer of all things, that he gets to be the one to define how the world works. And so in that manner, Romans makes it pretty clear that, like you mentioned earlier, everyone that is not submitting to Christ knows that he exists, but is suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. So I think it's the only thing else that would be worth saying there, but yeah.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's jump in. I'll jump back to this later. But I want to get to the knowledge of God next and talk about the kind of where do we start when we're talking about the knowledge of God?
Hello, this is O. Henry. Join us next week for the next part of this exciting episode.